welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain Pacific Rim. This movie tells the story of a war between humankind and monstrous sea creatures. A former pilot and a trainee are paired up to drive a seemingly obsolete special weapon in a desperate effort to save the world from the apocalypse. Will they be able to subdue the giant monsters? Let's find out in Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim begins by showing two terms, namely kaiju, which means giant beast, and Jaeger, which means hunter. In the year 2013, alien monsters called kaiju appeared from an interdimensional portal called the Breach at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. The kaiju attack major cities around the world in succession so that the military in each country find it difficult to withstand their attacks, and the world is threatened with the end of the world. All countries in the world decided to join hands against the kaiju and forget their rivalry. They then worked together and built large robots called Jaegers. Initially, the Jaeger was controlled by one pilot. However, because the mental stress of controlling Jaeger was too much, the Jaeger ended up being controlled by two or more people, who shared a mental link through a process called drifting to share the mental stress of driving a machine. The drifting process is very important because both pilots must be compact and share the same mind and mental burden to control the Jaeger. 7 years since the first kaiju appeared, in the year 2020, a Category 3 kaiju appeared in a city. The brothers, Yancey and Raleigh Beckett, who pilot a Jaeger named Gypsy Danger, are assigned to defend the city from Category 3 kaiju. In carrying out their mission, the Beckett brothers are accompanied by Tendo Choi, Jaeger's computer technician who will direct them through the control room at the headquarters, and Marshall Stacker Pentecost, the commanding officer at the Pan-Pacific Defense Corp, who always monitors the fights of Gypsy Danger and the kaiju. In the middle of the ocean, a fierce battle between Gypsy Danger and kaiju is inevitable. Moreover, Category 3 kaiju are very powerful and much larger in size. Even so, Raleigh and his older brother, Yancey, still try to beat it. Raleigh was pretty sure that they had managed to subdue the kaiju after firing the plasma cannon. Unexpectedly, the kaiju rose again and attacked the Gypsy Danger and tore apart part of the Jaeger, killing Yancey. After the death of his older brother, Raleigh can't help but have to drive a broken Gypsy Danger alone. He mustered all the strength he had left, until he finally killed the kaiju and drove the Gypsy Danger back to the beach alone before collapsing. Raleigh, who was traumatized by the loss of his older brother and unable to endure the mental stress alone, finally decided to quit the Jaeger program. 5 years later, world leaders decided to discontinue the Jaeger program because it was deemed unreliable. They will replace it with a coastal defense wall and stop funding the Jaeger program. Marshall Stacker was then asked to transfer the remaining Jaegers to a military base in Hong Kong. On the other hand, Raleigh, who now works as a construction worker for a coastal defense wall in Alaska, watched live on television as the kaiju easily destroyed a coastal defense wall in Australia. Raleigh's co-workers immediately became pessimistic, seeing the efforts they had been doing had gone to waste. Shortly after that, Stacker, who tracked Raleigh's whereabouts, arrived at the defense wall construction site to re-recruit him as a Jaeger pilot. At first, Raleigh refused because he was still traumatized by Yancey's death. But Stacker manages to convince Raleigh to fight back together against the kaiju. Raleigh finally arrives at Jaeger's headquarters at the Shatterdome military base, Hong Kong. Stacker introduces Raleigh to a woman named Mako Mori, the Jaeger Restoration Program Director. Raleigh was also introduced by two kaiju experts deliberately employed by Marshall Stacker, Newton Jaisler and Herman Gottlieb. Stacker then takes Raleigh around in the Jaeger's garage, which can accommodate 30 Jaegers. But now only 4 Jaegers are still in operation, Gypsy Danger being refurbished, Cherno Alpha piloted by Sasha and Alexis, a couple from Russia, Typhoon Crimson piloted by Wai Tang brothers, triplet boys from China, and Striker Eureka, piloted by father and son, Hercules and Chuck Hansen. To the crew of the Jaegers, Stacker explains his plan to destroy the breach using tactical nuclear weapons. Raleigh, who heard this, expressed his doubts because they had tried to close the portal several years before but failed. Stacker confidently said that his plan this time had a much greater chance of success than in previous years. Gottlieb suggested to Stacker that they should immediately put the plan into action because he observed that the kaijus were increasing and coming in succession. However, Newton expressed concern because he thought that their plan was not very mature and further research still needed to be done. He suggested that they drift with kaiju brains to dig up information to be better prepared to deal with kaiju attacks and carry out more efficient plans to prevent the future apocalypse. Stacker and Hercules agree more with Gottlieb because they think drift with kaiju brains is riskier. On the other hand, Mako tells Raleigh that she dreams of becoming a Jaeger pilot and gets perfect scores in all Jaeger pilot competency exams. However, Marshall Stacker did not give her permission to pilot the Jaeger. Even so, Mako has prepared the best candidates to accompany Raleigh in driving the Gypsy Danger. Raleigh then suggests to Mako to convince Stacker that she is really capable of piloting a Jaeger. Mako follows Raleigh's suggestion, but Stacker still refuses because he thinks that Mako has not been able to control her emotions. To find a new co-pilot, Raleigh participates in the pilot, but he beats all the candidates and feels no match for all of the candidates. Raleigh then asks Mako to fight him, which turns out to keep up with Raleigh, indicating that they are quite compatible with drift. But Stacker still doesn't allow Mako to pilot the Jaeger, even though Raleigh asks her to. Meanwhile, Newton, annoyed that his proposal was not taken up, decides to try a drift with the kaiju brain in the research room. When his mind connected with the kaiju, he saw the origin of the kaiju, where those giant beasts were deliberately cloned by the aliens to invade the Earth and annihilate the human race. The scene then switches to Raleigh, who will take a live drift test with the co-pilot candidates in the improved Gypsy Danger. Initially, Raleigh wanted to invite Mako to take part in the test, but she refused. Not long after, Stacker, who finally melted after seeing Mako's hard work and sincerity as a Jaeger pilot, then gave permission for her to take the drift test with Raleigh at Jaeger Gypsy Danger. Raleigh is surprised to see Mako, who will be his co-pilot, but he's happy for her. On the other hand, Gottlieb tells Raleigh about Newton's drift trying to connect his mind with the kaiju. Stacker rushed to the research room with Gottlieb and Hercules. Newton reveals that the kaiju's attacks so far are only the beginning. The aliens are preparing for a far more deadly final attack to wipe out all forms of life on Earth. Stacker then asks Newton to do the drift again, but Newton says that he needs a kaiju brain that is still alive or at least recently dead. To that end, Stacker instructs Newton to find Hannibal Chow, a man who sells various kaiju organs on the black market, to obtain another more compatible kaiju brain. Meanwhile, Raleigh and Mako, who were at Gypsy Danger, suddenly remembered their past. Raleigh recalled the tragic incident that killed Yancey. This makes Mako forced to remember a terrible incident where Mako, who was still a child, had to lose her parents because of a kaiju attack. In her childhood memory, Mako was almost killed by a kaiju who attacked Tokyo, and it caused her, who was in Gypsy Danger, accidentally activated a weapon and was about to fire a plasma cannon, making everyone panic and run away in fear. Finally, Raleigh was able to calm Mako and the threat was thwarted. Chuck then approached Raleigh and Mako and cursed them because everyone almost died because of Mako's carelessness while doing drift. Raleigh, who did not accept being insulted by the rookie pilot, punched Chuck and the two men got into a fight. They had just stopped the fight when Hercules came and interrupted them. After that, Stacker decided to remove Mako from the Jaeger program, even from her position as director, for the negligence she had committed that threatened the safety of many people. With tears in her eyes, holding back sadness and disappointment, Mako accepted it, even though she had to. Raleigh tries to convince Stacker that the first drift experience never ends smoothly because no matter how close their relationship to someone is, it will take time to align their minds. Raleigh then confronts Stacker about Mako's past, where in fact, she has been saved by Stacker, the first-generation Jaeger pilot that still uses a single pilot system. Since then, Stacker decided to adopt Mako and never allowed her to pilot Jaeger because he didn't want his adopted daughter to feel the same burden as him. On the other hand, Newton managed to find Hannibal Chow and was about to make a transaction to buy fresh kaiju brains. At the same time, Tendo detects the appearance of kaiju in Hong Kong. Not only one but also two kaiju appear at once. Stacker takes down all the Jaegers except Gypsy Danger and orders Striker Eureka to serve as backup as the Jaeger has been prepared for the mission to close the breach portal. The big battle of the Jaegers against the two kaiju in the Hong Kong Sea is fierce, where they all have the ambition to destroy each other. On the battlefield, Striker Eureka, who couldn't stay still seeing the other Jaegers overwhelmed by kaiju attacks, finally decided to help them. When the Crimson Typhoon was taken down by one of the kaijus, the other kaiju managed to destroy the Cherno Alpha. Entering the battle arena, Striker Eureka immediately attacked one of the kaiju. However, unexpectedly, another kaiju appears behind the Jaeger and instantly disables Striker Eureka with an EMP explosion, which kills the entire Jaeger's electrical system and all of Hong Kong. Raleigh then advised Stacker to take down the Gypsy Danger because the Jaeger was an old version of the Jaeger that still uses a nuclear reactor, not digital-based, so it is not affected by the EMP explosion. Stacker couldn't help but heed Raleigh's advice and allow Mako to accompany him to drive the Gypsy Danger. On the other hand, Hannibal Chow, who was annoyed after knowing Newton had done a drift with kaiju brains, then told him to hide in the bunker because the kaiju who attacked Hong Kong this time were after him. Drift is actually a two-way connection, and since Newton had drifted with one of the kaiju, the other kaiju were able to gain access to his brain. When one of the kaiju intends to destroy the Striker Eureka, who is experiencing engine failure due to an EMP explosion, the Gypsy Danger comes and attacks the kaiju immediately. Fierce fighting ensued to ravage the entire coastal region of Hong Kong. Gypsy Danger was finally able to subdue the kaiju with cannon fire. Meanwhile, the other kaiju manages to find Newton's whereabouts and attack the bunker. Just as the kaiju was about to kill Newton, Gypsy Danger arrived just in time to save him. After successfully killing all the kaiju who attacked Hong Kong, Gypsy Danger then returned to the Shadow Dome and was greeted like a hero. Stacker even showed a proud smile to his adopted daughter, who managed to subdue 2 kaiju on her first day piloting a Jaeger on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Newton and Hannibal, who immediately rushed to the location of the kaiju's carcass that had just died to retrieve the important organs in the kaiju's body, especially the brain, then realized that the kaiju was pregnant because they felt a heartbeat in her stomach. The baby kaiju was born prematurely, but was wrapped in the umbilical cord and didn't move anymore. Hannibal, who was very sure that the baby kaiju was dead, was suddenly devoured by the baby kaiju, who came back to life. But then, the baby kaiju appears to be choking on its own umbilical cord and ends up actually dying. On the other hand, Stacker reveals to Raleigh that he has terminal cancer from driving the first-generation Jaeger, which did not have radiation shielding. So far, only Stacker and Raleigh have survived after piloting the first-generation Jaeger. At the same time, Tendo detects the appearance of kaiju around the breach, which is a good sign to carry out their plan to close the portal. Stacker then prepares the 2 remaining Jaegers, Striker Eureka and Gypsy Danger, to carry out a final mission to face the attack of alien kaiju monsters and prevent the world's destruction. On the other hand, Newton and Herman plan to drift the kaiju's brain together. Due to Hercules' injury, Stacker replaces him to pilot the Eureka Striker with Chuck. Mako was worried about her adoptive father's condition, but Stacker reassured her that he could still drive the Jaeger. Stacker says that this could be a suicide mission to which the Jaeger pilots won't be able to return safely. Even so, Raleigh, Mako and Chuck are determined to keep fighting until the end to save the world and all of humanity. Meanwhile, Newton and Herman, who had been doing a drift with kaiju brains, looked very panicked and frightened by what they saw in kaiju's mind. Approaching the breach, the Jaegers are immediately attacked by kaiju, which makes them quite overwhelmed. Newton and Herman, who arrived at the headquarters control room, then told the Jaeger pilots that the breach has a kaiju DNA detection system, where only kaiju can pass through the portal and shoot out any object that is not a kaiju. In essence, Newton said that the Jaegers had to ride the kaiju to enter the breach. At the same time, Tendo detected the appearance of a Category 5 kaiju, the largest kaiju in history that had just appeared for the first time in the world. That Category 5 kaiju can easily knock out strikers and try to destroy them. Meanwhile, Gypsy Danger, who managed to paralyze another kaiju, tries to help Striker Eureka, who is being ganged up by the kaiju. But Stacker and Chuck have another idea of using the bombs they carry to destroy the kaiju who are ganging up on them. As such, Striker Eureka will blow himself up to destroy kaiju, especially Category 5 kaiju. Stacker then tells Gypsy Danger to close the portal with their nuclear reactor. Before carrying out the plan, Stacker and Chuck then said goodbye to their families. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, Striker Eureka explodes violently, and the kaiju are killed, along with Stacker and Chuck. Riding on a kaiju carcass, Gypsy Danger enters the breach. However, the Jaeger was attacked by a Category 5 kaiju who was still alive. With great difficulty, Gypsy Danger tries to beat the kaiju deep into the breach. Raleigh tries to help Mako, who is unconscious due to lack of oxygen due to a kaiju attack, by putting her in escape pods and throwing her to the surface of the sea. After that, when Gypsy Danger enters the alien dimension, Raleigh manually activates the nuclear reactor and enters the escape pods, just before Gypsy Danger explodes and closes the breach for good. The film ends by showing Raleigh and Mako's escape pods emerging on the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Raleigh briefly faints from lack of oxygen, but Mako manages to resuscitate and they hug when the rescue helicopter arrives.